Well, hello everybody and welcome back to Autopilot Education, our YouTube channel. And today we're going to be continuing our Airbus A380 series where we look at the Airbus A380 made by Fly-by-Wire on Microsoft Flight Simulator. In this video we're going to be looking at abnormal operations and basically just going to give you a small overview of some of the systems that we have on the A380, some basic failure management, and also looking at some of the differences that are on the simulator and compare them to what we do in the real world. So to give you some information about our current flights, we're currently on our way from Riyadh in Saudi Arabia to Cairo in Egypt, and we're at a cruising altitude of 38,000 feet. So if all goes well, we're going to be looking at a few systems today. The first one we're going to be looking at is the Flight Management System, or the FMS as we call it. Now the FMS is a really key component of the A380 and we use it primarily for navigation, and we also use it for performance and for system management as well. There are two flight management systems on board this A380. FMS1 is used for the captain and FMS2 is used for the first officer. We can see that we've got on our MFD, we can see that FMS1 is being used on this side and FMS2 is being used on that side. And each flight management system uses what's called a flight management computer. And this basically takes information and provides it to all flight information to the PFD, the ND, the MFD, the EFIS, and the KCCU, and also supplies some secondary systems as well. Basically, there are three flight management computers: FMC-A, FMC-B, and FMC-C. Now FMC-A, Flight Management Computer A, supplies information to FMS-1, the captain's side. FMC-B supplies information to FMS-2, the first officer's side. And then FMC-C, Flight Management Computer C, is a standby one, and this basically ensures redundancy for the whole FMS system. So therefore, if one FMC fails, then the FMC-C will take over and basically the FMSs can function as normal. They work independently, so they get all their data and calculate it independently, and then they share that information and cross-check it together to basically ensure that accurate information is presented to the pilots via all of our screens and systems here. So I hope that makes sense. We've got on this switching panel, we can see this FMS switch here, and it's currently in norm. And basically, this switch here is in the event that if we lose an FMS. So say I lose my FMS, a lot of the information here is going to disappear. And the way that I can restore this information is by moving this to both on 2, and this now means that data is being taken from the first officer's FMS and shown on mine. That's a very basic overview. Don't want to dive too deep into it because that's more for type rating things. This is just to give you an overview of the flight management system. So now we're going to have a look at what happens if one FMC fails. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the iPad here, I'm going to click on the failures button, and it's under auto flight, and we can see failures, auto flights, FMC A, B or C. So we're going to fail FMC A, so I'll click this here, and here we can see we've got auto flight FMC A fault. Now before we dive into that, the first thing we do, and we do this with every failure, and it's something that's drilled into us in flight school and we continue throughout our career, and that is aviate, navigate, communicate. You may have seen it on other videos in the channel. It's the first thing that we do whenever we get an abnormal situation or a failure. So aviate, what do I mean by that? I'm going to look at my PFD and make sure that the attitude is appropriate, speed and the altitude are also showing what I expect it to. Moving up, I'm going to check the FMAs. These are the flight mode enunciators. So the speed mode is in Mach. The vertical mode is in alt cruise, which is what we can expect since we're in our cruise altitude. And we've also got nav as our lateral mode. And yeah, this is all we can expect. We're going to ensure, in terms of modes of automation, autopilot 1 is engaged. We've got one FD2 and auto thrust. So these are all the active and engaged modes. It's what we can expect to see, and if they weren't engaged, they wouldn't be on there basically. So that's all looking right. That's the aviate side done. Navigate. So I'm going to be making sure that we're following the correct navigational path, and also then I also like to think about weather. So we could be dealing with a failure, but if we're about to fly through a thunderstorm, that's going to take priority. Terrain, in the same way here, we want to make sure that we are clear of all terrain. This is obviously in the cruise now at 38,000 feet, that's not going to be an issue. But if we get a failure and we're flying, towards a mountain, fixing a failure isn't going to help us there. The main priority is to stay clear of that terrain. And then also traffic. So in busy airspaces or busy, like if we're departing or arriving into an airport, we want to make sure that our vertical speed is sensible, and because we don't want to be dealing with a failure and then all of a sudden we get a TCAS RA. So that's what I see as navigate. And then finally communicate. Do we need to speak to air traffic control right now? In this case, no. Do we need to let the crew know or say anything to the crew? Again, in this case, no. This isn't a big failure. We can just let them continue as normal. So the only real communication is between the two pilots there. So that's aviate, navigate, communicate. Now we can go in and we can confirm the failure. So we've got auto flight, FMCA fault. We're going to check the overhead panel, and here there's nothing which confirms the failure. There's also nothing on the system display page. However, you'll notice on the MFD, we've now got FMS1C, whereas that says FMS2, we can see here this says FMS1C. Now what this means is that FMCA has failed, and now FMCC has taken its place, and that's now providing all the data to the FMS. So that's what we can do to confirm the failure. So we can see that we do have an FMCA fault. So ECAM actions, FMS switching norm, it's in normal, and the next action is to clear the failure. So we're just going to press the tick here. That's cleared the failure. There's nothing on the status, but before we do that, we're going to stop the ECAM and we're going to consider any checklists that we need to do, any resets. There might be something if we have a look in our manuals, and also any expanded checklists. So there's no normal checklists, there's no normal flows that we need to do. Looking at the resets, there is a reset. I'm going to bring this up now. So we can see that we've got a flight management computer FMCA reset, and we can see that it's possible to reset it if we get this ECAM alert, which we did, or they're not in normal operation configuration, which they're not. So in case of FMC faults, affected FMC reset pull. So we're going to go ahead to our overhead panel here, and looking up, we can see we've got FMCA, that circuit breaker. Now we can't pull this on the fly-by-wire, but we would pull that, wait 3 seconds, and then push it, and then we'd be looking to see if this has restored it. So obviously we don't have this today, but this is what we'll be doing in the real world. And if it comes back, then great. And if not, then at least we can continue just with our normal FMS configuration. But just now, FMS 1 is being supplied by FMCC and not FMCA. So there's nothing on the status page to read. There's no expanded checklist to consider. So that is the ECAM actions complete. And that's basically a very basic failure management demonstration. Maybe in the real world, we would also probably let our maintenance team know so that they can reach out to Cairo maintenance, who will then come on board once we get into Cairo and look at fixing the failure for either us or the next crew that are going to take the plane. And that's pretty much it. That's how we deal with an FMCA failure. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at some hydraulics, and for the hydraulics there are two hydraulic systems on the A380, and this is actually different to a lot of other more conventional aircraft, especially more conventional. If you look at the previous Airbus aircraft, the A320, 330, 340, they all have three hydraulic systems, green, yellow and blue. But on the A380 we only have two, which is green and yellow. And I'm going to go more into this in a bit, but just to give you an overview of what the hydraulic system does. Hydraulic system is also another very important part of the aircraft, and it's responsible for powering things like the flight controls, the landing gear, cargo doors, and yeah, a lot of other systems. And if we bring up the hydraulic page here, so we can see this is on the left side we've got green, and on the right side we've got yellow. A bit at the bottom is the hydraulic reservoir, and this is a reservoir for the hydraulic fluid, and this hydraulic fluid is then sent to these engine-driven pumps, which pressurize the hydraulics to it should be about 5,000 psi, so in this case 5,100 psi. And then the hydraulics, then that hydraulic power is then sent to move. It is sent to move, like the flight controls, for example, via an actuator, and an actuator basically converts that hydraulic energy into physical motion. So that's kind of should give you some idea about what the hydraulic system is. As I mentioned earlier, there are two hydraulic systems, green and yellow, and the reason why there aren't three is because we have what's called an EHA or an EBHA. This stands for electro-hydraulic actuators, or electro-backup hydraulic actuators. And this basically allows, this was a fantastic bit of innovation from Airbus, fantastic bit of engineering. It's basically allows to save weight and means that you can remove one hydraulic system completely, because you've got several electro-hydraulic actuators which use electrical power to locally generate that own hydraulic pressure to move the flight control surface. So it's strictly related to flight control surfaces, but it basically means that if we lost the yellow system, for example, the flight controls wouldn't actually be affected in terms of the ailerons and the elevators, because we have these kind of small, they're basically like small hydraulic sources, essentially, which will generate their own power and allow these surfaces to still move and still function as normal. So it's really, really smart. It's basically, just think of it, it's a self-contained, it has a self-contained hydraulic reservoir and a self-contained source of electrical power to pressurize this hydraulic fluid and move the flight control surface. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit complex. Again, it is more type rating things, but in today's failure, we're going to be seeing that why, when I fail a green and yellow system, the plane actually still flies pretty well. In fact, we're still able to keep the autopilot in, which compared to the 320, when you had a dual hydraulic failure there, you would lose the autopilot. So it's incredibly smart. It saves money. It's because obviously you're lighter, and it also ensures a very, very strong level of redundancy. So yeah, there's two types of electro-hydraulic actuators. There's the electro-hydraulic actuator, which is it's basically, that's powered by one electric system, and then there's an EBHA, electro backup hydraulic actuator, which can be powered by either the electrical system or the hydraulic system. And in normal operation, it's an actuator which works as normal, supplied by the green and yellow hydraulic system. If the green and yellow hydraulic system fail, it now becomes an electrical actuator. So again, ensuring a very high level of redundancy, and yeah, it's just a very, very smart system. It does take some getting used to. It does take a little while just to wrap your head around it, but it's a very, very, very smart system, and yeah, like I said, one that ensures a lot of redundancy and certainly makes our life easier, because if we did lose the green and yellow hydraulic system, we're then having, at least we have the autopilot, the automation still available, and we're not having to worry about manually flying an A380 in alternate law. So today we're going to have a look at what happens when we fail, when we get a reservoir failure. So that's, if I go on hydraulic power and going back to this hydraulic system, what happens if this reservoir fluid goes? Now that's because of a leak, and the alert is brought up to us when the reservoir level drops below 10 litres. And we're going to have a look at it now. So we're going to come off that. Everything is as normal. Obviously we've got this FMCA failure, but that's not affecting us too much. So I'm going to put green reservoir leak first, and let's just simulate this. It's going to take some time. You'll see we're not going to get the failure straight away. If we go on the hydraulic page, we can see that fluid is going to slowly start decreasing. So let's see what happens. Okay, so here it is, master caution. First thing we're going to do, cancel that master caution. And just like we did last time, we're going to do aviate, navigate, communicate. So we've got some more master cautions there. And so, again, attitude is appropriate, speed and altitude are good. Our FMAs are what we expect to see. We've got Mach, outcruise and nav. Autopilot's still engaged. We've got one FD2 and auto thrust is still engaged. Looking outside, we're following the route we want to follow. No weather about. There's no terrain at this altitude to think about. And traffic is not a threat either. Communication, we don't need to let air traffic control know, and we don't need to let the cabin crew know either. So that's aviate, navigate, communicate, and now we can confirm the failure. So we've got hydraulic green reservoir level low. We'll confirm this on the system display page this time. We can see that that there's no fluid in the reservoir. On the overhead panel, there is nothing well, we can see on the green on the green part of the overhead panel, it's got all fault lights there. So we can confirm that this is a failure of the green system and that the green reservoir level is low. So then it's ECAM actions. Now at ECAM actions, it is assumed that say I'm pilot flying. When I call for ECAM actions, I'm also going to take the radios from the first officer, and the first officer will work through the failure with me. So any radio calls I will answer. So we've got hydraulic green reservoir level low, green engine 1 pump A and B off. So we've got green, let's move up here, green engine 1 pump. So the way I like to do it is I like to move my finger up to hydraulic, and we've got green engine 1 pump A and B off. Engine 2 pump A and B off. So we've got hydraulic, engine 2 A and B off. Green engine 1 pump A and B disconnects. So this is a guarded switch, so we'll confirm this. So we'll confirm green engine 1 pump A and B. It's confirmed. That's disconnected. And green engine 2 pump A and B disconnects. Again, engine 2 pump, green engine 2 pump A and B confirm. It's confirmed. Disconnected. Now, we've done all the actions that we need to do here because they are in white, and so that means that we've done them. So the next score will be clear hydraulic, clear, tick this, and it brings us up with the next thing that we need to do. Hydraulic, green engine 1 pump A low, pressure low. Well, that's to be expected because the reservoir, there's no fluid anymore, so it has no fluid to pressurize, and therefore the system does not work. So green engine 1 pump A is off, which we have already switched it off. So again, the call from the pilot monitoring, in this case the first officer, will be clear, and I will say clear, tick. And as you can imagine, it's going to say it for all the other pumps. So hydraulic green engine 1 pump B pressure low, green engine 1 pump B off, clear, clear. Hydraulic green engine 2 pump A low pressure low, green engine 2 pump A off, it's already off, clear. Hydraulic green engine 2 pump B pressure low, green engine 2 pump B off, and it's off, clear, clear. So hydraulic green system pressure low, and now this is basically giving us some things. It's like a memo of some sort. It's going to give us some things that we need to consider for the latter stage of the flight. You'll see on the PFD that it's also here, but I'll just read it on here. So we've got flap slow, slat slow, landing gear gravity extension only, landing distance affected, for taxi, steer endurance limited. Okay, so these are good things to think about, and we'll discuss them later. So for now, clear, clear, and bring up the status again. And once again, stop ECAM. Consider any flows that we need to do, or any normal checklists. In this case, there is none. Any resets, again, the fluid system is lost. There's no resets applicable for this. It's not going to come back. And any expanded checklists, well, yes, in this case, we're going to be having to extend the gravity by gear extend landing. We're going to have to extend the landing gear by gravity extension only. So this is something that we can discuss now or later. So status, this is limitations. These limitations are here, which we've already gone through. And then for info, FMS 1 on FMCC, which we know. FMS predictions unreliable. On dry runway only, landing distance affected less than 15%. So this basically means that our landing distance is going to be affected, but on a dry runway the distance isn't affected too much, it's only by 15%. However, if it were wet or contaminated, even worse, then our landing distance is going to be more severely affected. Finally, Cat 3 single only. So again, for Cairo today, we're not going to be doing low visibility procedures, but if we were, this is something that we'd have to think about. So in-op systems, it would say any systems that are inoperative, but for now we are just fine. It breaks it down into all phases and the approach and landing. This just helps us go through it, it breaks down the information a little bit more, and certainly something that we can use for the briefing. So next call is remove status. Remove status. So that should remove it. Okay. It's not going to. And no, there we go. Cool. Status removed. ECAM actions are complete. So now we're left with this. We've just got this memo here. That's not going to go for the rest of the flight because the failure isn't going to be fixed. But basically, this is what should be on the status page, but it's here. So max speed 220 knots. That's obviously for the landing gear. Slat slow, flap slow, landing gear, gravity extension only, steering due, endurance limited, and landing distance affected. Cool. So we've got this failure now. That's the ECAM actions complete. A little bit of failure management that we would do now, and that's, well, we can look at DODAR. Other pilots use other things. I know there's 4DEC about, but the one that I use is DODAR. It's just a failure management model. It basically allows us to really break things down and manage this failure effectively and with simplicity. So it's what I like to use. You may have seen it in other videos, but basically D is diagnosis. So we diagnosed the issue that we had a green hydraulic reservoir low. It's due to a potential leak in the reservoir, so we just got to bear that in mind. Options are to continue, divert, or return. Now, do we want to continue to Cairo? Do we want to return to Riyadh, or maybe we can divert somewhere en route? So we'd have a look at our chart, our map, and see what we want to do. Decide. In this case, we're going to continue to Cairo. In the real world, what we probably would have done is we can actually phone up our company on the A380. We can speak to them on just like a normal telephone conversation. That's by pressing this telephone button here. On the fly-by-wire, it doesn't work at the moment, but yeah, it's what we'd do. We'd basically speak to the engineering department and we'd say, look, we have this green hydraulic reservoir low level. We believe we have some sort of leak. We've gone through the actions. The aircraft is flying absolutely fine with the automation still available. We will be able to land in Cairo because it's a nice long runway with dry weather. Is there anything that you would like us to do? They would probably come back to us and say, continue to Cairo, and we've informed them of the situation, and they'll meet you on the ground, and we'll go from there. Sometimes they might say return back to your destination, maybe if it's your base or your hub. It kind of really depends, and it depends on the failure. It depends on where you are in the flight and a lot of other things. So we're going to continue to Cairo in this case. Assign. This is breaking down any other tasks that we need to do. So we've got to think about landing performance. We're going to want to talk to air traffic control and tell them that we might be leaking some hydraulic fluid. So that's just for them to consider once we land. We've got to talk to them about once we've landed, is there anything else that we want to consider there? So that would basically be saying all these different things that we need to do. If we need to speak to the cabin crew, that will come under assign. In this case, we don't. So yeah, landing performance, and then also just we could review the manuals, see if there's any other bits of information in there, looking at your FCOM, and maybe some other manuals as well. But in this case, that's all. We'd see that as done. I'll do a quick landing performance, and then finally review. It's basically just a review of the failure, and in this case I like to just move that to the briefing part and just kind of checking in on the failure, see if there's anything different that we need to do as well. And that is basically how we would handle basic, well, not basic, but I'd say moderate hydraulic issue on the A380. So we do a landing performance. Obviously on this function, on the iPad we don't have that function just yet. But you know, Cairo, it's a nice long runway. It's dry. With this failure, it's not going to affect us too much. So I'm happy to continue to Cairo for now. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at our second hydraulic failure and our third failure in total. And this is going to be a failure of the yellow system. So as you can see, the yellow system is currently working. We've lost the green system, but thanks to the electro-hydraulic actuators, our flight controls and everything, I'll bring up the flight control page here. While you can see that while the green system is down, you can see that this like electric sign here basically is showing that despite the green system failed, the EHAs and the EBHAs are still working absolutely fine, ensuring total redundancy of the flight control system. So everything's basically working as normal, and yeah, nothing on the flight control side is affected too much. You're going to have to just ignore what's going on with this navigation display. I don't really know what's going on. You can see we've got IMROV is the next waypoint, but for some reason it's showing Miras, and I think in general it doesn't. Yeah, I'm not too sure what's going on here, but it's heading in the right direction, which is the most important thing. But yeah, we're just going to have to ignore that. I think that's just a sim fault on my side. But anyway, let's look at the next failure, which is the failure of the second hydraulic system. So we're going to be doing a let's have another reservoir leak, and so I'm going to click that. And again, it's going to take a little bit of time just for all the fluid to go, but then we can see what happens with a dual hydraulic failure, which, to be honest, isn't as serious as you might think on the A380. Okay, so that's master caution. So we'll press that there, and we can see hydraulic reservoir level low. So once again, aviate, navigate, communicate. So aviate wise, we've got appropriate pitch and sensible speed, altitude holding nicely as well. We've got MAC, outcruise and nav still as our FMA. This is what we expect. AP1, 1 FD2 and auto thrust are all still engaged, see? So despite having a dual hydraulic failure, we've got all the automation still working fine. We've got a little more information on our memo here. We'll look at that later. Navigation, we are, well, let's say that we're following the assigned routes, and around us there's no weather to avoid at the moment. No terrain to be, we're all clear of terrain, and traffic wise as well, there's no traffic that's a threat for us right now. Let's aviate, navigate, communicate. Do we need to let A to C know? Right now, we've still got the autopilot in. We're still flying normal, pretty much normally, despite this failure. So I'm going to say no, and no need to let the cabin crew know either. If we make any sort of cabin crew attention crew stations or anything like that, that's just going to scare them and create a lot more work for them and then for us later. But for now, this failure, they're not going to know if there's been any change to the aircraft, nor are the passengers, so we may as well just keep it as normal. Just coming back to navigate, because this thing isn't doing the best job of following its route. I'm just going to go in heading and just select 280 for now. Cool, so that's aviate, navigate, communicate, all done. And now we can confirm the failure, which is hydraulic, yellow, reservoir level low. On the system display page, we can see the entire yellow system is in amber, that there's no fluid in the reservoir. On the overhead panel, we can see that we've got loads of amber lights on the yellow panel there as well. Cool, so that's the failure confirmed. So ECAM actions, so once again, I'll take the radios, it'll be the first officer going through the failure, and they'll say yellow, engine 3 pump A and B off. So move up to hydraulic, yellow, engine 3 pump A and B off. Yellow, engine 4 pump A and B off. Again, yellow, engine 4 pump A and B off. Yellow, engine 3 pump A and B disconnects. Same how we did it for the green system. We're going to confirm it. So confirm yellow, engine 3 pump A and B. I'd confirm it. Disconnected. And yellow, engine 4 pump A and B disconnect. Again, overhead panel, hydraulic, engine 4 pump A and B confirm. It's confirmed. Disconnect. So once again, next action is to clear it. So we don't press the clear button here, we tick it instead. And that gets rid of that. So we've got hydraulic, green and yellow system pressure low. So a few things to do here. So all engine pumps off, which, because they're in white, shows that they have all been switched off. MFD serve TORS flat mode off. So where do we find this? We go on serve, and then flat mode is here. We'll switch it off. The reason why we do this is because we no longer have flaps. So as you'll see soon, we no longer have flaps, and this basically means that by switching this system off, we're going to prevent any sort of nuisance alerts like too low flaps once we get closer to the ground on the approach. So we're just switching it off to prevent those alerts. Slats slow. For landing, flap lever 3. Landing gear gravity extension only. No auto land. For go around, keep slat flap config. Fuel consumption increased. FMS prediction unreliable. Landing distance affected. See, it no longer says if dry runway less than 15%. Now it's landing distance affected, and we'll look at why in a bit. For taxi, steer endurance limited, and we'll also look at this as well. So we've gone through that. Clear hydraulic is the call. Clear. And we can see on the limitations, all phases, fuel consumption increased. Approach and landing, max speed 220. For landing, flat lever 3. Slat slow, landing gear gravity extension, no auto land. For go around, keep slat flap config. Steer endurance limited, landing performance affected. TORS flat mode is off as we switched off. Next thing, status, and the call will be stop ECAM. Once again, is there any flows that we do? No. Any expanded, any resets? Again, no. Expanded checklists? Yes, we've got the landing gear gravity extension procedure to go through as well. Cool. So we can now read the status, limitations, and there is pretty much not too much change. So FMS 1 on FMCC, which we know, alternate law protections are lost. So alternate law. So in the real world, these two green little lines here, they'll be replaced with an amber cross. So that's how we know we're in alternate law. FMS predictions unreliable. Okay. Alternate brake with anti-skids. So we've got alternate braking with anti-skids, so that's something to go back to. Avoid max tiller angle turn on wet contaminated runway. Okay. In-op systems are here. Basically, for some reason it's up here, even though it should be on the status as well, which you've had a look through already. That is that. Status removed. Ecam actions complete. Again, I think I'll do. Cool. That's the status removed and the ecam actions complete. So we're going to go through a few things, what we might have now. So with where it says steer endurance limited, where it says that, we're basically in alternate nosewheel steering. And this basically means that we only have enough hydraulic pressure now to land and vacate the runway. After that, Airbus recommends that we don't steer the aircraft anymore. So in that case, we're going to have to get towed to our stand. So that's something to consider. That's something we're going to have to coordinate with air traffic control and Cairo as well. And just some other things to consider. So we're in alternate law, but we've got the autopilot available. The flight controls are now all actuated. So as we spoke about, actuator is what is converting that hydraulic or electrical power into actual physical motion. So we can see here that all of the systems are now basically backed up by the electro-hydraulic actuators, or the electrical backup hydraulic actuators. So you can see that's why that we're still able to have the autopilot in. Pitch trim, okay, is that's in amber, and obviously the flaps showing where it says green and yellow, there's no little electrical sign there. So that means that they're not supplied by an EHA, whereas the slats are. So that's why the slats are working, although slowly, but we've completely lost the flaps. You can see that actually, you know, the passengers won't know what's going on, the cabin crew won't know what's going on, and whilst our workload has gone up a little bit, it's still not going to seriously affect us. And this is the thing that I love about the A380. This is why, you know, it's such a good aircraft, because it's so go-minded aircraft. On the 320, if this happened, we'd have to divert. But now on the 380, when this happens, we can actually continue to our destination most of the time. The only thing, you know, you're not going to divert for many reasons on the A380. The only reasons that I can think of, just to give you a few, maybe, well, a fire, of course. If there's a serious medical incident with a crew member, or a serious medical incident with a passenger, which the company feel that we need to divert for. And that's pretty much it. Even with an engine failure, you can have an engine failure and still fly for hours on end. So it really is a go-minded aircraft. And yeah, fantastic really. So, I'm going to clear that. Now we would go through our DODAR once again. So we diagnosed the issue of, this time, a dual hydraulic failure. However, the aircraft's still flying fine with the autopilot in, flight director in, and the auto thrust in. Options, continue, divert, or return. Again, we'd go through our options here. Do we want to divert maybe on this route to somewhere like Medina in Saudi, or even Aqaba in Jordan, or Amman in Jordan? Or do we want to continue to Cairo? I mean, Jordan is very close to Egypt, so it wouldn't make sense diverting to anywhere in Jordan and creating a lot of workload for us. We're still flying absolutely fine. This is an issue that can be solved in Cairo, so we may as well continue to Cairo. We'd confirm this with the company, we'd speak with them, we'd say this is what we've got. They would advise us to continue to go to Cairo. So that's D, because we're going to decide to go to Cairo. And A, assign. Okay, there's a few things to consider here. Obviously, a landing performance is required. We'd speak to the, we would say that we've spoken to the company, but we'd speak to air traffic control and coordinate vacating the runway, and also the possibility of having hydraulic fluid on the runway after we've landed. We might let the senior cabin crew member know, just to help us manage our workload, because if they, at least if they're aware, they can, you know, manage how they interact with us and how often they interact with us as well. And yeah, that's about it for assign. And then review, like we said earlier, we'd have a look in the brief, and we'd talk about things that we need to do, such as the landing gear gravity extension checklist, and also just some of the approach and landing considerations, which we can use this memo here for. So that is a dual hydraulic failure on the Airbus. That's an FMC-A failure on the Airbus, and as you can see, we're still flying to our destination, which is fantastic. Like I said, very go-minded aircraft, which makes our lives significantly easier and makes the passengers' lives and crew's lives a lot easier as well. So everyone, thank you so much for joining me on exploring abnormal operations on the fly-by-wire Airbus A380 in Microsoft Flight Simulator. This wraps up part 1, where we explored handling some basic to moderately challenging abnormal scenarios. And stay tuned for part 2, where we'll be covering the approach and landing phase in an abnormal condition. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, drop a comment below to share your thoughts or ask questions, and subscribe to the channel and check out our other videos for content on the A380 and A320. Thanks for watching and for your continued support, and I'll see you in the next one. Safe skies and happy flying.